Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about Kislev in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. This is a race I've talked about a lot on this channel, and in fact this is the race that I've played the most in Warhammer 3 with the exception of the dwarves, because the dwarves are just so ridiculously good after the release of Thrones Decay that well over 10% of my entire playtime has been devoted to them. But regardless, we know what Creative Assembly has stated that they will do. This video is to talk about various things that I think Creative Assembly should address with regards to Kislev to improve their campaign situation, that we don't know whether or not they will or not do them. So there are still things that they haven't talked about in that blog post that I do certainly hope that they will improve. Just a quick note, what they've basically said in that blog post is that they're going to remove this entire supporter system. I'm not sure how it's going to work with invocations, whether or not they remove invocations as well and just make it a local effect. My read on that blog post is that they want to make Kislev more of a race that plays tall as opposed to crazy expansionist, because thematically, it doesn't make sense for Kislev to be significant conquerors. But if you're playing a Kislev campaign, that's how you want to play it, because you don't have the tools needed to succeed in a turtling campaign. Unlike, say, the dwarves. Like, the dwarves have those tools. Even before the addition of the deeps, the dwarves could have gotten away with playing defensively. Kislev could not have done so. So let's talk about various things that I think Creative Assembly does need to address. First off, it's the whole Ice Court mechanic system. If I start training a Frostmate as Katrin, who incidentally has a benefit with respect to this, if I start training a Frostmate, then it's going to take 6 turns. And I'm going to have to make a number of decisions with regards to that. Now, to unlock the slots, to even train them in the first place, I have to research it. So if you're not playing Katrin, you have to spend 4 turns researching something to even get access to it in the first place. And the problem is, these heroes and these lords are so ridiculously good with the right combination of effects. And you can also recruit them through the load save character system with the really, really good traits you may want. Not necessarily something like Suck. Like over here, I just have a Frost Maiden because I wanted to have one saved up. But for instance, I can get Ice Charioteer, I can get Ranger. I really think that they should reset the load saved characters, at least for Kislev, when they do release 6.1. But this entire system of taking multiple turns to train a hero or a lord that may have some good effects, as opposed to guaranteeing it through the load save character system, is pretty infuriating. And it's also completely busted, because you can get free construction if you get enough builders, for instance, or you can get a ridiculous amount of patriarch capacity, or you can get a significant amount of growth benefits. So regardless of what you're going for here, there are some ridiculously powerful benefits, but it is randomized. It takes a long time to get all of these Ice Witch Lords. That's one thing that I do hope is changed. If they don't change it, we'll still use the load save character system. It will still work. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's the highest priority, but I do think it is a ridiculously bad system the way it currently works right now. The second thing is with respect to confederations. The inherent problem when you're dealing with Confederation, the vanilla Confederation, where you gain a certain level of diplomatic relations with the faction and then you can confederate them, is that in a Kislev campaign in particular, especially with Prague, but not just Prague, if you're playing Boris Ursus or Stanka, it applies to Katrin and Kastaltin as well, is that these special Kislev cities have some very significant military benefits, especially Prague because of the global recruitment duration. And also the Lord and Hero recruit rank that it provides. So you do want Prague. You want it as high of a level as possible. It starts as tier 2. The problem is, if you leave them alone, and even if you try and help them against a Frot or a Zazel or Arbol, they still might get attacked by someone else. Like, let's say you're playing a Gestalten campaign, you have good relations with Prague, you might want to help them out. But then Katrin might declare war on them and take them out. Or someone might show up. Relying on the AI to stay alive, if they're not a Legendary Lord faction, is a sketchy thing at best. So I think, like, what CA needs to do with respect to this is give us some guaranteed confederation. Not just with the major factions, but also the minor factions as well. The major factions should require more effort than the minor factions, but given how fast these minor factions can be wiped out in a campaign, like, in 2 turns, the Drazina Enclave is wiped out, in a couple of turns, the Brotherhood of the Bear is wiped out, a couple of turns, Prague can be wiped out. I think that's something that they should give us availability in a campaign. One way or another, either as a special mechanic or just buying it with money, something. Because right now, it just incentivizes you to engage in plain bullshit. Like, for instance, if I'm playing a Katrin campaign, what I always want to do in every single campaign is take Zavastra, sell it to the Drazina Enclave, get a significant portion of their money, and on turn 2, I can guarantee Confederation, or on turn 3. That is plainly a broken campaign system in more ways than one. And that should not be the incentive structure in a campaign. If you're playing a Boris Ursus campaign, it's even worse, because you then have to worry about the Confederation with Gestalten and Katrin, trying to keep both of them happy and weak, so they'll confederate with you. It is especially bad, though, with Katrin and Gestalten, because they do have guaranteed confederation, but it takes you 600 supporters to get there. And it's just not really a great system. So you gotta understand the pacing of a campaign. So campaigns, regardless on which skill level you're playing, even for people that play long campaigns, the meat of that campaign, the most important decisions, the most consequential decisions in that campaign will always be taken within the first 30 turns. Regardless of how long it actually takes you to beat the campaign, that's when the most consequential decisions are going to happen. Now, I know CA is trying to change that. That's one of the reasons they're improving the campaign AI. That's the reason behind the beta. But until they do, that is how the game is being played right now. Or until they actually give us a proper endgame, which the endgame crises are not. And in fact, one of the developers basically said, like, yeah, I don't really care for the endgame crises. So that's something, like the guaranteed confederation aspect would be a tangible change that Creative Assembly could make. This is one of the things that made the Dwarf such a superb race to play, because it gave you so much more variety in how you tackled your campaign. To be sure, it wouldn't work for Kislev in the same way it works for instance, the Dwarves, because the Dwarf Legendary Lords are fairly spread apart, but it is just an idea over there. Like, as opposed to, me having to always, as Katrin, always have to rush to try and keep Boris Ursus alive from Archeon and Arbol, as an example. Just some ideas with regards to that. The third thing, with respect to Kislev, would have to do with the skill lines. So, generic Lord skill lines. So, Boyar skill lines are non-existent. They don't have a special skill line. They don't have anything great. I understand that Atamans are supposed to do that, but yeah, Boyars are just not really fantastic. And even Ice Witch Lords are not really that great as a Lord choice. The traits they have are great, but if we look at their actual skill line, it's pretty barren in a lot of ways. I mean, you do get the Frost Worm, to be sure. And with regards to skill lines, we can also think about Katrin's skill line. Katrin is a really weak mage within the context of Warhammer 3. You want to think of a good magic caster? Scrag is a good magic caster. Drazif is a good magic caster, though they're not dedicated caster. They're also really good at melee. Teclis is a really good dedicated mage. You also have Marafi to think about, though she's more of a hybrid lord herself. But you do have some really powerful caster lords. Katrin is not that, because one, Her magic skill line is not as good as Tempest magic. She has Frost magic, she doesn't have Tempest magic. Yes, you can get things like Horn of Winter, but the Hawks of Miska is a better spell. And more importantly, you don't really have that many benefits in terms of casting spells. Yes, you get a cooldown benefit, but you don't get ridiculous Winds of Magic cost. Like, one of the reasons Drazov is so ridiculous is his final skill reduces the Winds of Magic cost by a fairly significant amount for one of the most powerful AoE spells in the game, the Flames of Asgore. You do get some Winds of Magic cost benefits, but it is all over the place. Also, she's not really a good leader for Kislev either. Like, Boris Ursus has a much better diplomacy benefit, and he can also colonize ruined settlements, and that's a skill line. So, Katrin's skill line is very weak, Boyar's skill line is not that great. It's better for Kastaltin, to be sure, but it's not necessarily old sunshine and daisies for him either. So I do think those skill lines do need to be improved. Then, beyond that, you also got to talk about Kislev from the perspective of the regions of Kislev and the campaign. So the regions of Kislev are not especially great. It was worse when Immortal Empires launched because you didn't even have proper provincial capitals, which made Kislev worthless for pretty much everyone, especially poor Fraught. Now, you do have provincial capitals and the special cities of Kislev, but it's still not really great for anyone, really, because the special cities of Kislev can offer you some tangible benefits, to be sure, but these are mostly military benefits or hero benefits. I do also find it a bit absurd that Kastaltin has access to Frostholm, which gives him Hero and Lord recruit rank and Frost Maiden capacity when he's representing the Grey Orthodoxy. I think that's something Katrin should have. So one of the problems with these cities, they take a lot of money to invest in. They don't grow as fast, even though you have two different growth buildings. And the fact that you're consuming 2 slots for those growth buildings is not great either. But you do have 2 different growth buildings, but a proper province with 4 settlements would grow faster if you had it. The Old World mod actually presented a really elegant solution to all of this, in that in the Old World mod, the special Kislev cities have their own provinces. Now, I understand there's limits to what CA can do with regards to the map, but I feel like each of these cities should be in a province with at least 2 other settlements. That would be my point of view on that. Not sure how they could change the map to accommodate it. Maybe, I don't know, maybe like, say, Kislev City would have, like, let's say you would put these 2, you'd take Zhoishnik and Alexandrinov and put them together with Erengrad, and then you'd have these 3 settlements with Zavastra, and then you'd remove 1 settlement over here, or maybe have Kislev City with being a 4-region province over here, like Kislev, Igorov, Fort Jakova. Or maybe Fort Jakova should be its own special settlement, like a kind of force settlement to guard your eastern pass, eastern gateway into Kislev. Just some ideas I'm throwing out there, but regardless of how they decide to do it, they should make changes with regards to it, to all of this, with respect to Kislev. There are options. I understand that they can't easily enlarge a map, at least that would be my perspective on it, because they would have to change the whole shape of the entire map. But I gotta say, with regards to changes to regions, one of the things that made Forge of Kasdorf so amazing is that it didn't just add the whole new race, but it also significantly improved every campaign that had to deal with the Darklands. Emmerich's campaign ended up being better. Grimgor's campaign ended up being much better purely because of the terrain changes made in the Darklands. It made for a much better campaign experience for everyone that had to deal with that. Even in Kislev's situation, if you're playing Boris Ursus, let me tell you, going to the Darklands is a much better option than dealing with Kislev itself as a Kislev faction. So that's something I do believe Creative Assembly should look to change, the way the regions of Kislev actually are. And then finally, the economy of Kislev. The special cities, yes, they can generate a decent amount of money, but consider the Warriors of Chaos. They have limited territories with their dark fortresses. But each of those dark fortresses can generate a huge amount of money. But because they have an income modifier, you don't really have that. You have some trade tariffs, markets, and all that, but it's never really worth it. Like, you can get up to 15% from markets at tier 5, faction-wide. That is just not a good amount. In minor settlements, you spend 2,000 for 200 income, and only in the provincial capital you can get plus 50% tradable resources. The money is there, but the pacing and the pace at which you get that money makes taking a lot of territory not really worthwhile. It's certainly not worthwhile to invest in territory in the short term, because by the time you actually get that money back, a long, long time has passed in your campaign. There's other ways of making money. Those things involve abusing the AI one way or another. That is not a playstyle that Creative Assembly should incentivize. I think like Kislev should at least have an economy that's as good as the Empire, and maybe even better in these core cities. Because these core cities, at least Erograd and Kislev, should be quite rich in the lore, which is not represented well at all in the game. I know there are going to be some economic benefits that they've shown with their replacement for the current supporter system, but if you don't change the economic structures themselves and improve them, I would just say that what they need to do is they need to give us more money. They need to ensure that we're not spending 10 turns to just get our money back. Actually, it's more than 10 turns. It's kind of like 11 turns to get this 1,000 gold back. And then, 15 turns, 17 turns to get the mark for a tier 2 economic structure. That is a horrible deal. And makes it so that it's not really worth investing in that. It should be worth investing in that. I understand some limits should exist, but Kislev should do better. Or maybe a system where, they rely on the economic support from the Empire because they're the shield of civilization, as it were. Like if you are fighting chaos, for instance, a lot in your campaign, you're going into Norsca and all that, as opposed to conquering the Empire is giving you economic support. I don't know, something along those lines. I'm just throwing ideas out there. But regardless, the economy of Kislev needs to be more worthwhile. I do like the idea that they're toying around with climate suitability over time. They've mentioned that. I'm skeptical because with the climate suitability mod, is a slow process. And I think because of the way the current meta is, if you have a process that takes me 12 turns with significant investment in terms of infrastructure and all that, controlled buildings, lots of money put into it, to make a province worthwhile, that is not really worth it for me to bother with. It's not going to certainly make the Chaos Wasteland appealing unless I'm playing as Boris Ursus, for very clear and obvious reasons. Anyway, that is all I had to say. Christine signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.